What if the past is more advanced than the present dares to imagine? Beneath the sands of time, in forgotten tombs and weathered caves, lie fragments that defy everything we thought we knew about civilization. These are not myths or rumors. They are objects, heavy, physical, measured, that quietly whisper of something else, of intelligence beyond the reach of ancient hands, of knowledge seated before we were supposed to understand it. In the high desert of New Mexico, 1947, twisted metal fell from the sky. Official reports called it a weather balloon, but those who held it in their hands described something else. A metal that refused to tear, to burn, to stay broken. When bent, it returned to its original shape like memory itself. Scientists who studied the fragments in silence spoke of molecular structures unknown to Earth, of isotopic ratios belonging to distant stars. And then the silence became official. The metal was locked away, studied under layers of classification. What it taught us nudged forward materials science, but only in whispers. In Iraq, a set of clay jars discovered in the 1930s turned out to be more than ancient pottery. Filled with copper and iron, they became known as the Baghdad Batteries. At first glance, they seemed quaint, but under scrutiny, they behaved like components of a modern electrical system. Microscopic wire networks, rare earth elements not native to the region, a current that pulsed long after it should have faded, as if someone, long before the age of electricity, had understood power in a way we're only beginning to grasp. Then there's the Antikythera Mechanism, pulled from the seabed near Greece, believed to be an astronomical calculator. But deeper analysis tells a stranger story. Its bronze gears conceal components that function at the quantum level, capable of parallel computation. Some parts seem to exist in multiple timeframes, their isotopic ages conflicting. The entire device defies linear chronology, as though it emerged from both past and future at once. All these objects, and bar, share a haunting trait. They suggest a technological literacy far beyond their time, and each has been quietly taken, hidden, studied behind closed doors. Publicly dismissed, privately feared, but the question remains, why are they here? This series is not a hunt for conspiracy. It's a meditation on the limits of our knowledge, on the arrogance of assuming we are the first to know, the only ones to understand. These artifacts, whether cosmic in origin or born from a lost chapter of human history, challenge the narrative we've accepted. They suggest that intelligence, wherever it arose, may have visited before, may have taught, may have left behind its trace. We will follow 10 such artifacts, 10 whispers in metal and stone, from crystal skulls that pulse with light to perfect spheres that vibrate with sound unheard. From ancient batteries to impossible machines, each one opens a door not to certainty, but to wonder. Because perhaps the truth of our past isn't buried. Perhaps it's been sitting in silence, waiting to be seen. And if we dare to look, we may find that we were never alone, that we're not the beginning, just one note in a song much older, stranger, and more beautiful than we ever imagined. It began with a crash, or so the story goes. July 1947. A rancher in Roswell, New Mexico, stumbles upon strange debris scattered across the high desert. It glints oddly in the sun, not like any metal he's seen before. Thin, feather-light, yet unbreakable. He tries to burn it, cut it, bend it. It won't yield, and when crumpled in his hands, it unfolds itself, smooth, flawless, as if untouched. The official explanation? A weather balloon. The wreckage is whisked away by the military, the site scrubbed clean. But whispers linger. The man who first reported the crash, Major Jesse Marcel, spoke years later of what he saw. Materials that defied physics, fragments of a craft not of this earth. Inside military labs, behind locked doors and stone-faced silence, the fragments are studied. Scientists observe the impossible, a metal lighter than aluminum but stronger than steel. It resists all damage, all heat, all attempts to pierce it. And most astonishingly, it heals. Bend it, twist it, it remembers. It returns. At Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, deeper tests reveal a molecular arrangement with no known parallel. Isotopic compositions not native to Earth. Structures so precise they hint at atomic-level manufacturing, techniques we wouldn't develop until decades later. And even then, only in theory. Some researchers speak carefully of programmable matter, a substance that changes its form in response to electromagnetic signals. They note its ability to emit fields, to hold a steady temperature, to react to stimuli like a living thing. Others call it something simpler, memory metal. But its memory isn't ours. It's older, wiser. Years later, whispers trace breakthroughs in composite materials back to those quiet labs. The knowledge gleaned, even in fragments, changed what we could build, what we could withstand. But the source remained buried, both literally and metaphorically. What kind of intelligence could design a material that heals, adapts, and thinks? That behaves not just as an object, but as a system? Today, that metal still exists. Hidden, stored, guarded. Scientists lucky enough to study it describe the experience not in technical terms, but in awe. They speak of holding a future they cannot explain, a kind of technology that feels like time itself made solid. And so we are left with a paradox. If this artifact is real, and many believe it is, then history as we know it is incomplete. We are not the first to master the atom, to shape the very structure of matter. Someone else came before, someone who left behind not a myth, but a material, not a message, but a mechanism. In a locked vault under unblinking surveillance rests a sliver of the unknown. It is not a weapon. It is not a relic. It is a question cast in metal. What crashed in Roswell may not be the full story, but what we found, and what we still don't understand, is real. And it waits, still unbroken, for us to catch up. The desert winds of Iraq whisper stories older than empire. In 1936, among the ruins near Baghdad, archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig unearthed a set of clay jars, simple vessels, unremarkable at first glance. Inside them, copper cylinders wrapped around iron rods, ordinary components perhaps, but when filled with acidic liquid, they produced electricity. Electricity, from 2,000 years ago. Dubbed the Baghdad Batteries, these artifacts were initially dismissed as curiosities, anomalies without context. But behind the veil of classified research, a different picture emerged. Not crude prototypes, but advanced energy storage systems, capable of producing sustained electrical current. Jars that, when connected, mirrored modern battery arrays. Not merely sparks, but power. Dr. Ehrenreich of the Hildesheim Museum conducted tests away from public eyes. The results shocked him. These ancient devices produced consistent voltage over months. Their design hinted at deliberate engineering, an understanding of electrochemistry that wouldn't be officially recognized for another 2 millennia. X-ray scans revealed microscopic wire networks coiled within the copper. Too precise to be random, too intricate for the tools of the time. The wires showed no corrosion, despite their age. The metals bore signatures of alloying techniques unknown to early metallurgists, and the presence of rare earth elements, materials not found in Mesopotamian geology, raised deeper questions. Where did they come from? What's more unsettling is what was found around them. Hidden excavation reports speak of subterranean corridors, of copper lines stretching across kilometers of desert stone. The jars weren't isolated. They were part of something larger. A grid. A forgotten system humming beneath the soil. Not ruins, but remnants. Was it lighting, communications, ritual, or something beyond even those categories? We cannot say for certain. The original site has been sealed. The jars, the real ones, are locked away. What remains in museums are replicas, placeholders without power. The truth lives in shadow. And perhaps that's where it belongs. Because if these batteries are real, if they were part of an intentional system, then we must reckon with a haunting reality. Someone once understood electricity well enough to build infrastructure. Long before Tesla, before Faraday, before recorded science itself. Why then did it vanish? Was this knowledge lost, suppressed, or was it never ours to begin with? What lingers in the story of the Baghdad Batteries is not just an anomaly of engineering, but a challenge to the timeline of human progress. A quiet suggestion that the arc of innovation may not be a straight line, but a loop, a return, a rediscovery. And maybe, somewhere in the dust of forgotten empires, the current still flows, waiting to be remembered. It was pulled from the depths of the sea, encrusted in centuries of salt and silence. In 1901, sponge divers off the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon the wreckage of an ancient ship. Among the amphorae and statues was something stranger, a hunk of corroded bronze, its gears locked in silence. At first, it was thought to be just debris, until X-rays revealed the truth. Inside lay an intricate system of gears, levers, and dials. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, was labeled an ancient analog computer, capable of predicting celestial events with astonishing accuracy. But as technology advanced, and the mechanism was examined in greater detail, something emerged that challenged even the wildest interpretations. Hidden within the bronze casing were components that didn't belong to the ancient world. Crystalline structures embedded in the gears, elements that responded to quantum properties, not just mechanical precision, but quantum coherence. The device didn't just calculate, it processed. It didn't just model the heavens, it interacted with them. At CERN, behind layers of security, a team led by Dr. Tony Frey reanalyzed the internal fragments. Using high-resolution tomography, they discovered that certain gear ratios aligned not with simple astronomical cycles, but with constants from quantum physics, principles unknown until the 20th century. More shockingly, rotating one gear caused instantaneous reactions in others, even when physically separated. Quantum entanglement. In bronze. Some components dated accurately to the ancient period. Others, impossibly, appeared to be decades old, as if the device existed in overlapping time frames. A machine not just of ancient craftsmanship, but of temporal ambiguity, a relic out of place in more ways than one. How could such knowledge have existed 2,000 years ago? Was this truly the product of Greek engineering, or something else entirely, passed down, preserved, misunderstood? The public still sees it as a marvel of ancient astronomy. But behind closed doors, the mechanism has become something more, a paradox in metal, a window not just into the cosmos, but into time itself. What's most haunting is the device's predictive ability. It not only mapped past eclipses, it anticipated future ones with eerie accuracy, including those undiscovered by modern astronomers at the time of analysis, as if the machine was reading time, not calculating it. We like to think of history as a steady ascent, from ignorance to insight. But the Antikythera Mechanism suggests something different. A rise, a fall, a memory buried in salt and sea. It asks us to reconsider the trajectory of knowledge, to entertain the possibility that what we call progress might also be remembering, that buried in the silence of the past are echoes of a deeper intelligence, waiting to be recovered, gear by gear, turn by turn. Because sometimes the future hides inside the rust of the forgotten. In a jungle temple, under the shadowed canopies of Central America, a skull glistened like ice under torchlight. In 1927, British explorer F.A. Mitchell Hedges claimed to have discovered a crystal skull in the ruins of a Mayan site. Carved from a single block of clear quartz, it was eerily lifelike, smooth, symmetrical, anatomically precise. But what puzzled observers most was what they didn't see. No tool marks, no seams, no evidence of how it was made. To sculpt such perfection from quartz without fracturing it, even with today's tools, is considered nearly impossible. Yet here it was, gleaming in the jungle light, as if grown rather than carved. Over the decades, more skulls appeared. Not replicas, but other variations. Each made of the same flawless crystal, each with equally unfathomable craftsmanship. And soon, patterns began to emerge. When exposed to light, they refracted beams through internal channels, like optical circuits. Some emitted faint glows. Others responded to electromagnetic fields. At Hewlett-Packard Laboratories, Dr. Frank Dorland conducted private analysis. What he found shocked him. Fiber-optic pathways etched inside the crystal, too precise for any known ancient method. The skull behaved less like sculpture, more like a lens, or even a transmitter. Even more unsettling, the skulls seemed aware. When brought near each other, synchronized pulses of light flickered within them, as if they were communicating across distance. In some experiments, one skull would respond when another was stimulated, even continents away. Quantum resonance, some called it. Entanglement through crystal. In secret studies, groups of skulls projected star maps, some showing galactic positions not charted by human astronomy. Their holographic displays pulsed with data that modern minds couldn't decode, not because it was random, but because it was ordered by laws we don't yet understand. But it wasn't just physics that shifted around the skulls. It was presence. Handlers reported emotional fluctuations. The skulls reacted differently depending on the person, glowing more intensely with some, growing dim with others, as if attuned to consciousness itself, as if designed to interface not with machines, but with minds. Is it possible these were more than objects? That they were devices, nodes in a network far older than the civilizations that guarded them? From South America to Tibet, similar skulls have surfaced. Different sizes, but the same impossible precision. Taken together, they trace a global lattice. Not a myth, a system. And systems have purpose. What if these skulls aren't relics of the dead, but tools of the living? Not symbols, but instruments. If so, then who, or what, built them? The crystal skulls do not answer. They do not explain themselves. They only glow and respond and wait, perhaps for us to catch up, perhaps for something else. In their silence, they remind us, intelligence isn't always loud. Sometimes it listens, across space, across time, across consciousness itself, waiting for the right question. High in the mist-veiled mountains where China meets Tibet, a discovery was made that refused to fit into any known history. In 1938, an expedition led by Chinese archaeologist Chi Pu-Te uncovered a series of caves filled with hundreds of strange stone discs. Each was about 2 feet across, with a hole in the center and spiraled grooves etched meticulously into the surface. They resembled ancient phonograph records, yet predated even the idea of recorded sound. At first, the Dropa stones were dismissed as burial markers or religious artifacts, but deeper examination revealed something stranger. The grooves weren't decorative. They were microscopic text, hieroglyphs so small they required magnification to read. And when translated decades later by Soviet linguist Dr. Sergei Ladolf, the message stunned the few who were allowed to see it. They were manuals, technical records, not myths or legends, but science. The discs spoke of space travel, of ships crashing into the mountains, of beings adapting to Earth's environment. They contained diagrams of propulsion systems that manipulated magnetic fields, descriptions of flight paths between stars, and even protocols for genetic adaptation to alien worlds. Some dismissed it as fantasy, but then came the material analysis. The granite of the discs contained isotopes that didn't match any known Earth composition. as if the material came from somewhere else entirely. And when exposed to electricity, the stones emitted faint magnetic fields and low-frequency radio signals. They were more than historical records. They were storage devices. How did Neolithic peoples inscribe microscopic characters into granite, harder than steel, with no visible tools? How did they encode such advanced concepts thousands of years before the telescope, the microscope, or the rocket? The dating placed them at over 12,000 years old, predating all known civilizations. Yet they describe principles that wouldn't be rediscovered until the space age. And then came the most unsettling detail. The navigation data carved into the stones corresponded to stellar positions and distances we only confirmed through modern astronomy. Knowledge supposedly impossible at the time. Some scientists, under strict classification, noted similarities to modern digital encoding, the kind used in early computer storage. What if the stones weren't just carved, but programmed? If so, who were the programmers? Chinese authorities swiftly sealed off the caves. The original stones were locked away, access limited to a handful of military researchers. Officially, the discovery is rarely acknowledged. The few replicas on display are treated as curiosities, stripped of their context. But the truth lingers, spiral after spiral. What civilization, lost or unknown, possessed such knowledge? Was this the legacy of a forgotten epoch, or the remnants of contact with something else, something that passed through our skies and left behind not fire or ruin, but information? The Dropa stones ask us to rethink what a record can be. Not paper, not screens, but stone. Dense, ancient, magnetic. Memory carved into time itself. And in their spiraled grooves, a quiet message may still be waiting to be decoded. Not a story of gods, but a conversation across stars. Scattered across the jungles of Costa Rica lie silent sentinels, perfect spheres of stone, untouched by time and unexplained by history. First uncovered in the 1930s during banana plantation excavations, these massive granite orbs range in size from the palm of a hand to over 6 feet in diameter. Some weigh several tons. All share an uncanny geometric perfection. The largest deviate from true spherical form by less than 2 millimeters, a precision few modern machines could achieve, let alone pre-Columbian tools. There are nearly 300 of them, and not one bears a single tool mark. Dr. Samuel Loth of MIT led a classified study in the 1970s. His team used laser scanning and radar imaging to probe beneath their surfaces. What they found only deepened the mystery. Some spheres contained internal structures, layered arrangements of materials unknown to the region. These weren't carved boulders, they were engineered. Many of the spheres had been carefully placed in geometric formations, triangles, lines, and spirals that spanned great distances. But when viewed from above, the patterns revealed something astonishing. They mirrored the positions of stars and constellations, constellations only visible from orbit. How did ancient people with no known written language or astronomy create a ground map of the heavens? Petrographic analysis revealed that the stone, granodiorite, doesn't exist locally. It had to be transported from quarries hundreds of miles away through dense jungle and mountainous terrain. And yet not a single written record exists explaining why. But the spheres don't just defy gravity and geography. They defy time. Carbon dating of organic material embedded in the stones yielded contradictory results. Some samples were over 1,000 years old, others just a few centuries. It was as if the objects themselves resisted the passage of time, or existed outside of it altogether. Seismic studies brought more surprises. When exposed to certain frequencies, the stones emitted ultrasonic vibrations, precisely tuned, mathematically resonant, like tuning forks crafted to communicate beyond the range of human hearing. Could they have been part of a communication system, or instruments designed to interact with sound, energy, or perhaps even consciousness? Some researchers noted that when objects were placed near the largest spheres, they registered slight weight fluctuations. Not enough to be noticed by hand, but measurable. Gravity, it seemed, shifted slightly near their presence. Was it an illusion of magnetism? Or something stranger, a manipulation of local space-time? The spheres remain protected now, declared national treasures, but access to their full study is limited. Tourists can see a few. The deeper story, however, lies behind fences and silence. They tell us nothing directly. But in their stillness, in their perfect forms, they suggest a mastery of matter and meaning that doesn't align with our understanding of the past. Not crude idols, not mere art, but geometry, astronomy, acoustics, physics, all shaped into silent orbs that neither erode nor explain themselves. The Costa Rican spheres challenge the line between the natural and the engineered, the ancient and the advanced. They sit patiently in the earth, waiting for the right eyes, the right ears, the right questions. Across the arid plains of southern Peru, etched into the desert floor, are lines that refuse to fade and refuse to be fully understood. The Nazca lines have long captured the world's imagination. Vast geoglyphs of birds, beasts, and geometric shapes, visible only from the sky. Their scale is staggering, covering more than 170 square miles. Some stretch for miles in flawless straight lines across uneven terrain, valleys, hills, and ridges, as if drawn by an unseen hand from above. For decades, they were considered ceremonial paths or artistic expressions of a lost culture. But beneath the simplicity of the explanation, layers of strangeness unfold. Dr. Maria Reiche, working quietly with NASA advisors in the 1970s, uncovered secrets hidden beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating radar revealed subsurface structures, networks of channels and chambers beneath the lines. Not just drawings, but constructions. Not just symbols, but systems. Electromagnetic surveys showed that the longest lines resonated with specific radio frequencies. Some acted like wave guides, amplifying energy. Others, when stimulated, produced focused beams detectable from orbit. These weren't random designs. They were engineered with intent. One particular pattern responded to directed energy with an electromagnetic pulse. Another altered radio wave propagation in the immediate atmosphere. They weren't art, they were beacons. And then there was the glass. Soil samples revealed that some of the line surfaces had been fused, not just flattened, but melted into a glass-like glaze. To achieve that would require temperatures beyond what any known ancient culture could produce. No fires, no tools, no traces of how it was done. Only the result, a surface hardened by heat that didn't come from nature. Many of the shapes, particularly the long runways, show wear patterns unlike foot traffic. Their geometry is consistent with guidance systems, straight paths leading to geometric intersections, as if designed for aerial approach and landing. From above, they resemble navigation aids, not spiritual glyphs. But here's what truly unsettles. The Nazca lines align not only with celestial bodies, but with underground water sources and mineral deposits, hundreds of feet below the surface. Modern surveying equipment confirms it. Whoever drew them had knowledge of the land not just from above, but from within. Some patterns map constellations. Others track solstices, equinoxes, and eclipses. But the deeper alignments suggest even more: roots, energies, intentions. We have no framework for understanding. Could these lines have guided something? Or someone? And if so, who needed guiding? Today, access to certain areas is restricted. Drones are grounded, excavations halted. Officially, it's for preservation. Unofficially, it's because the more we dig, the less sense things make. The Nazca lines blur the boundary between ancient imagination and advanced engineering, between ritual and infrastructure, between myth and memory. They remind us that to look for technology is not always to find wires and screens, but alignment, resonance, precision, and intention. Carved into the earth itself, these lines may be messages, maps, markers, left not for their creators, but for the sky, waiting to be seen again from above. In the shadow of the Carpathian Mountains, near the Romanian city of Aiud, a discovery was made that seemed to fracture time itself. In 1974, construction workers unearthed a set of bones, ancient, belonging to a mastodon believed to have lived some 20,000 years ago. But buried alongside the remains was something that didn't belong, a wedge-shaped metallic object, partially fossilized into the same strata. It was aluminum. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. Aluminum isn't found in pure form in nature. It must be extracted and refined, a process not developed until the 19th century. Yet here it was, embedded in earth older than civilization itself. The artifact, later analyzed at the Romanian Institute of Archaeology, was composed of 89% aluminum, mixed with copper, zinc, lead, and other elements. A complex alloy requiring precise smelting techniques that did not exist in the Paleolithic era. Even stranger were the tool marks, fine, uniform, and unmistakably mechanical. The object had been shaped with precision machining, showing symmetry and surface treatment akin to aerospace-grade components. It didn't just resemble modern parts, it behaved like them. Tests revealed that the alloy resisted oxidation, defying what should have happened after thousands of years underground. The metal retained a clean, untarnished surface, as if protected by an advanced coating. When viewed under X-ray crystallography, its atomic structure showed evidence of rapid cooling, something only possible in high-tech industrial processes. Engineers noted its aerodynamic shape. Some suggested it resembled a strut or structural component designed to withstand intense force and vibration, perhaps even part of a larger mechanism, an engine, a vehicle, a craft. But how did it get there? Was it a hoax, contamination, or something far more unsettling, a fragment of a technology displaced in time? Isotopic analysis complicated the mystery further. The aluminum bore signatures not found in Earth's geology. It matched, instead, predictions for material formed in high-energy stellar environments, forged not in factories but in stars. Some researchers quietly proposed a radical idea. The object was real, and its age was accurate, which would mean that refined aluminum, and the ability to engineer with it, existed long before humanity was supposed to understand metallurgy at all. Was it the remnant of a lost civilization, advanced beyond our imagination? Or the trace of something not human, visiting long before we built our first cities? Today, the Aiud artifact is locked in state storage. Public discussion is muted. No museum exhibits. No further excavations at the site. It rests unnamed in a drawer somewhere, because to name it would be to admit it doesn't fit. We measure history by its materials: stone, then bronze, then iron. But what if aluminum, light, strong, and precise, came not after, but before? The Aiud wedge stands as a quiet impossibility, a reminder that the past may not be behind us. It may be scattered all around, misfiled, misplaced, or purposefully hidden, and sometimes it shines too brightly to be ignored. Buried deep within a Russian forest, embedded in ancient stone, something impossibly small rewrote everything we thought we knew about time. In 1998, geologists surveying the remote Kurgan region stumbled upon a peculiar rock formation dated to over 300 million years ago, a time long before dinosaurs, long before mammals, long before anything resembling human life. But inside the stone, under magnification, they found something utterly out of place. A screw. Barely a millimeter long, perfectly threaded, made of tungsten, one of the hardest metals known to science, with a melting point over 3,000 degrees Celsius. Too hard to shape easily. Too small to be a fluke of nature. Under electron microscopy, the threads showed flawless symmetry. Not worn, not warped by time. Uniform pitch and depth, as if made by machine, and not just any machine, but one operating at the nanoscale. Dr. Yuri Golubev of the Russian Academy of Sciences conducted a quiet, classified analysis. What he found was more than metal. It was intention. The tungsten showed isotopic patterns that did not match any known terrestrial source. It carried the fingerprint of stellar processes, heavy elements forged in the heart of supernovae. Not just rare on Earth, but impossible to find in nature here. How, then, did a microscopic tungsten screw, requiring precision, planning, and processing, end up locked in rock older than humanity itself? Skeptics called it contamination, a hoax, but other screws were found, not just one. Dozens across different locations, always the same dimensions, always the same precision, and always impossibly old. Some tried to dismiss them as fossils of sea creatures or crystal formations. But those who studied them up close, engineers, not just geologists, disagreed. These weren't shaped by geology. They were manufactured. Electron diffraction studies revealed crystal patterns inconsistent with known alloys. The grain structure suggested controlled cooling and assembly, like modern nanotechnology, but far beyond what we can currently achieve, even in the most advanced laboratories. And they weren't random. The screws followed engineering principles, mathematical ratios, load distribution, material stress tolerances, all embedded in a piece of metal smaller than a grain of sand. Who, or what, could have created such a thing? Was it a trace of an ancient civilization lost beyond memory? Or something more alien, more distant in origin, something that touched our planet long before our ancestors walked upright? There's no official answer. The artifacts have disappeared into restricted archives. Public discussion is limited to brief mentions and speculative whispers, but the implications remain. Not just that something advanced existed long before us, but that it had mastered not only materials, but scale, that it could manipulate matter at levels we're only beginning to understand. The tungsten screw is not just an artifact. It's a fingerprint, a fragment of a machine that no longer exists, or perhaps still does, somewhere beyond our sight. A whisper from a time before time. A question in metal, smaller than thought, heavier than truth. And still it turns silently in the mind of anyone who dares to imagine what came before. In the ancient rock beds of South Africa, older than any fossil, older than bones, older even than life itself, a sphere was found. Smooth, metallic, and etched with 3 parallel grooves, it was small enough to fit in a man's hand. But inside, it held mysteries vast enough to stretch across millennia. In 1996, miners extracting ore from Precambrian strata, rock dated to 2.8 billion years, unearthed the sphere. At first, it seemed like an anomaly, perhaps a geological oddity. But as scientists examined it, they discovered properties that nature does not, and perhaps cannot, produce. It rotated, not randomly, but on a fixed axis. Within its sealed display case, untouched by human hands, it completed a slow, silent rotation every 128 hours. No motors, no wires, no energy source. Just movement, steady and inexplicable. Then came the fields. Dr. Roelf Marx of the University of the Witwatersrand led classified testing. The sphere emitted electromagnetic signals, not background radiation, but patterned emissions. Fluctuations that hinted at internal activity. Machinery, systems, something awake inside the metal. Attempts to cut into the sphere failed. Tools dulled, drills overheated. And when minor surface abrasions were finally achieved, the metal healed. Slowly at first. Then faster. Within hours, no trace returned. It wasn't just hard. It was alive. Under X-ray, the sphere revealed internal architecture. Not random, not natural. Organized structures, finer than virus particles, resembling the circuitry of machines. Not carved or molded, but assembled. At the atomic level. The metal itself? Unknown. Its composition included elements never seen in Earth's crust. Some theorized it was made from exotic matter. In the heat-scorched lands of ancient Mesopotamia, under the weight of centuries of dust, a set of stone jars once sat unnoticed, until someone looked closer. But what if the most extraordinary artifact wasn't hidden in plain sight, but simply buried too deep in time to be believed? The story of the drop of stones, the Costa Rican spheres, the rotating metal orb, each pushes against the edges of our understanding. But there is a pattern, quiet yet persistent. Across continents and eras, these artifacts appear not as isolated anomalies, but as a kind of forgotten language, a code written in stone, metal, and crystal. The Roswell memory metal bends and returns, stronger than anything we've engineered. The Antikythera device calculates not just with gears, but with quantum logic. The AIU'd wedge and the tungsten screw both suggest technological development where there should have been none. One artifact might be an accident, two, a coincidence, but 10. Among the most chilling aspects is not just what these artifacts do, but how they behave. They interact, they respond. The crystal skulls glow differently depending on who touches them. The South African sphere emits stronger pulses when people draw near. The Nazca lines function as electromagnetic beacons, as if guiding something through the sky. And the pattern doesn't stop at the artifacts themselves. It extends to what happens after they're found. Every single object we've explored in this journey has one thing in common. It vanishes from public view, placed in secure storage, studied behind classified walls, removed from conversation. Secrecy follows discovery, like a shadow stretching across time. Why? Because these objects don't just challenge history, they challenge authority. They disrupt the idea that knowledge has followed a neat upward curve from ignorance to enlightenment. They ask, what if knowledge has been lost, recovered, or even given? Across ancient maps, sacred texts, and star charts, there's a whisper. Of visitors, of sky people, of knowledge that descended from above. We've dismissed it as myth, as metaphor. But perhaps it was neither. Perhaps these artifacts are the remnants of those encounters, not stories, tools, not symbols, systems. We may never know for certain. The truth, like the objects themselves, remains partially hidden, by choice, by fear, by design. But what they leave behind is more than mystery. It's a call to curiosity, a reminder that the story of humanity might be longer, stranger, and more interconnected than we've been taught. Not everything that is real can be dated. Not everything that is true can be classified. And maybe, just maybe, these silent witnesses of the impossible were never lost. They were waiting for us to begin the search again, not just in the dirt, but in our assumptions. To ask the question that echoes through every artifact we've touched. What if we were never alone? In vaults beneath government buildings, in warehouses without names, in labs you'll never read about. The artifacts sit in silence. They are not forgotten. They are hidden. Each one, the Roswell memory metal, the Baghdad Batteries, the quantum-geared Antikythera device, exists not in rumor, but in record, studied, measured, classified, and then, quietly, removed from view. Why? Because they don't fit. They defy timelines. They disrupt origin stories. They whisper of intelligence that predates our earliest tools, our oldest myths. And perhaps most unsettling of all, they suggest that we were not the first to reach for the stars, to master light and matter, to dream in circuits and crystal. Throughout history, we've rewritten our understanding of the world with each new discovery. The earth not flat, the sun not circling us, the atom not indivisible. But these artifacts demand more than a rewrite. They demand a reorientation. A confrontation with the idea that human history is not a straight line, but a loop or a spiral. A memory fractured by time, stitched together by mystery. They also demand humility. We are so certain of our supremacy, of our position at the pinnacle of progress. But what if we are merely one version in a long line of attempts? One note in a symphony that began long before us and will continue long after. The secrecy surrounding these artifacts may be driven by fear, not fear of the objects themselves, but of what they imply. That contact has occurred, that civilizations rise and fall in ways we do not yet understand, that the universe is not silent, merely patient. If the skulls do communicate, if the lines do guide, if the screws and spheres and wedges and wires truly originate from elsewhere, then we are being invited to listen, to study, to remember. These are not relics of fantasy. They are data, signals, evidence, and they do not scream for attention. They hum, quietly, persistently, just beneath the threshold of belief. The choice is ours. Dismiss them, and we remain where we are, safe in our stories, sealed in certainty, or follow them and risk everything we think we know. This journey through 10 artifacts has not provided answers. It was never meant to. Instead, it offers something rarer and more precious, a frame of mind, a lens, a willingness to accept the unknown not as threat, but as teacher, because somewhere beneath the noise of history, the forgotten still speaks. And if we learn to listen, truly listen, we may not find certainty, but we may find meaning, not in what we know, but in what we've yet to remember. What does it mean to remember something we never knew? As we gather the threads of these silent witnesses, the orbs, the skulls, the gears, the wires, we are left not with certainty, but with invitation. Each artifact we've explored is a door ajar, a riddle carved in stone or soldered in forgotten metal. They don't declare, they suggest. Together they form a mosaic of disruption, anomalies that, when seen separately, might be dismissed. But when placed side by side, they whisper a different story, one in which knowledge may have risen before, crested, and fallen again into silence. One in which intelligence, perhaps not ours, touched this earth, left fingerprints in matter, and moved on. We're trained to believe that history is linear, that we began in darkness and gradually climbed toward the light. But what if that's only part of the story? What if some of that light came from before us? What if we are not the peak, but the echo? Across these 14 parts, we've walked through mystery, not to draw conclusions, but to reopen questions that were buried too quickly. Questions like, can technology exist without a traceable origin? Is knowledge always human? And why, above all, are these things hidden? The true weight of these artifacts lies not just in their physical impossibility, but in what they reveal about us. Our fear of what doesn't fit, our instinct to bury what doesn't belong, our need for history to be tidy, reassuring, ours. But wonder has never lived in certainty. It lives in tension, in paradox, in the space between what is and what might be. Perhaps that's where these artifacts truly belong, not as exhibits or evidence, but as symbols of how much we still don't know. As reminders that science is not about answers, but about questions held long enough to change us. So we close this story not with proof, but with perspective. Because maybe the past is not behind us, but all around, encoded in forgotten alloys, hidden in resonant stone, humming beneath our feet in lines and patterns too old to name. Maybe we were never meant to find these things, or maybe we were. Not to fear them, but to remember that our story is not finished, that we are not the first, that we may not be the only, and that in the silence of the lost, in the glow of the unexplained, something waits. not to be worshipped or weaponized, but simply to be understood. The artifacts remain. And now, so do the questions.